Oxo Dam Road. It's a 2-mile, 2-lane country road in the northwest quadrant of Montville, just southwest of Norwich. If you have AT&T, you'll hardly have service here. Trees line most of the road, which more or less follows Oxo Brook. If you're coming from the east, you should drive about 1.5 miles, past a field on the left, past a gun club on the right. Erika Cirioni's body was found here, where the road starts to decline, just ahead of a sharp left curve, about 70 feet from the left shoulder. There's a stream nearby, and today, there's also a makeshift memorial to the mother of 2, who was 26 years old when she disappeared.
From the Day in New London, Connecticut, I'm Carlos Virgen, and this is Case Unsolved. Here is reporter Lindsay Boyle with part 2 of the Erika Cirioni story.
Looking at this memorial, and I'm seeing, I don't know what the significance of these is, I'll have to ask, but I'm seeing some solar-powered lights that have hummingbirds on them. There's a graded bunny rabbit, it looks like, and a couple things that are butterflies, and also a couple ribbons tied to the tree here that both say Erika Cirioni on them. And if you look over the edge, you'll see a bunch of rocks at the bottom. Right now, some empty beer cans. I'm pretty sure that that's actually where the remains were found, not up here right off the edge of the road. But of course, it makes more sense to put the memorial up here. For the record, there's also a memorial down below. We just hadn't found it yet. I actually had to call Jason Pagan, Erika's nephew who you heard from in the first episode, for help finding her memorial. I asked him later about the trinkets that are there. He said the bunny was left during an Easter visit. The other things, the angels, butterflies, hummingbirds, they're general signs of beauty meant to remind Erika she's loved, missed, and never forgotten. Children playing in the area found Erika's bones, covered by some rocks, on March 18, 2012. You can see the road if you're standing by the indent where her bones were placed. But if you were driving by, you probably wouldn't think to look over.
We were right there.
Erika's mom, Carol, was speaking from the home of one of her daughters, Lisa Mello.
Right there. I went down that road, I don't know how many times we followed the river there. I mean, I couldn't believe it, because I'll be honest with you, at first I thought, no, it's probably that little girl, what's her name? Pendleton? Remember, she lived in that area, and they never found her remains or anything.
She's talking about April Dawn Pennington, a 15-year-old girl who sneaked out of her parents' Montville home on May 29, 1996. In 2010, a man named George Leniart was convicted of raping and murdering April, even though her remains never were found. To our knowledge, Leniart never has been connected to Erika's case. He is in the process of appealing his conviction, though.
I even told my boss at Foxwoods, I said, I don't think it's my daughter, I think it's that young girl. They probably finally found her remains. And it wasn't, it was my daughter. And I feel bad for those kids that found her, because can you imagine, they must be having dreams. I mean, come on, you go outside to play and you see this skeleton with rocks on top. And the thing is, me, her, and a couple other people, we went around that area, but we never thought about getting out of the car and looking down.
5 years, 3 months, and 18 days after her mother last saw her, Erika Cirioni's case officially turned from that of a missing person to a homicide. And police have reason to believe her remains were somewhere else before they ended up in Montville. But I'll get to that later. I've been trying to find information, and it sounds like you reported Erika missing on January 3rd. Does that sound right? I'm talking to Carol at her Sullivan Drive home in Norwich.
No, I went down the next day, but they told me that we couldn't report her as missing yet because she had to be gone 48 hours. So meanwhile, me and my daughter and a couple of family friends, we would look through swamps. I mean, I walked through water, and I went to a psychic and she told me that she was someplace in New London. And I had people looking around New London, they didn't see her.
So you went immediately.
Oh yeah, we looked for her.
The following Monday, January 8th, police asked the public for help in the search. They said Erika was 5 feet, 7 inches tall. She weighed 158 pounds, had red hair, blue eyes. A Chinese symbol was tattooed on her back, the word Lewis etched on her right ankle. Jason, Erika's nephew, said he's pretty sure the name has to do with a man Erika was with during her troubled years, but he can't remember who.
I will say that before the remains were found, this case was treated as if it was a potential homicide. So all appropriate leads are followed up.
That's Christopher Conley, the lieutenant who oversees the Norwich Detective Division. He and Detective Kyle Bessie spoke from a room within the department's Thames Street headquarters. Kyle's handling Erika's case.
When somebody goes missing for a great deal of time, you always have the thought in the back of your head whether this could be a homicide or if it's just truly a runaway. But I would say, for the most part, as more time passes, we treat it as foul play involved, just to play on the safe side. Ultimately, this one changed in 2012 when we found the remains. And like I said earlier, based on the circumstances, we knew that we had to transition into or away from a missing person.
The case took cops all over the region. On August 14, 2008, for example, they converged on the backyard of a Division Street home where Erika sometimes stayed with a friend. Erika's mom couldn't remember that friend's name.
Well, she met this kid there, and well, they had planned some kind of thing. And I don't know, I guess he ended up in jail, and I don't know, I didn't really know him, but she'd come up the house and she'd, and talk to us.
Acting on a tip, city and state police brought cadaver dogs, crime investigation vans, and a backhoe to the home.
I was at work, and one of my supervisors came to me. He said, "Carol, go to the office right now." I said, "Why?" The ladies and the head boss, Bonnie, she says, "Carol, you got to go home." She goes, "Where are your grandsons?" I said, "They're home." She goes, "Well, go home. They're digging up and looking for your daughter's body a couple houses down from yours." I said, "What?"
And they didn't even tell her that.
I wasn't even notified. So they had a guy take me all the way home. I left my car there, and they had a guy take me home.
So your address back then, you were on Division, right?
Yeah, 83, yeah.
83. So what would this address have been? The one where the backyard was dug up.
Oh, I don't know the number, but it's the blue house, a couple houses down.
The house was at the intersection of Division and Reynolds Street, about 400 feet away from Erika's mom's place. Police removed the wooden fence and dug up about a quarter of the backyard, but then they left. The search was fruitless. Later, officers would dig up parts of the property that used to house the Norwich Hospital. It's a psychiatric hospital that opened in 1904 and closed in 1996. The property sits on the Thames River, about a 10-minute drive from Carol's old home on Division. It's seen its share of arson and vandalism over the years. Police dug up several yards in Preston, too. That's the town that sits to the east of Norwich. Whereas Norwich is a city of about 40,000, Preston's more rural, home to just 4,700.
They did take the helicopter up. We did see that. They did look over bodies of water. And then they found a kid was fishing down here at the marina. And I guess he had a hard time pulling something up, and it was a big clump of hair. So my granddaughter told me that the truck was down there. So I got in the car and I went down there and stood around. I asked the detective, I said, "Did you find anything?" He said, "Oh, we can't say." I said, "But it could be my daughter down there or somebody else's daughter down there." "Oh, no, it's nothing."
She's talking about hair a fisherman pulled from the Norwich Harbor in June 2007. It was human, officials said, but not connected to any missing persons cases. Carol and Lisa searched whenever they could, too. The two of them spoke from Lisa's Cedar Street home.
The water, we followed the Thames River, bringing full circle. All the way around to London, all the way up Hartford, Wilmanic, Marlborough, everywhere. We went everywhere.
We went to Bates Woods, and we were jumping on tires through swamps, really. And we seen tents. We looked inside the tents. I guess belonged to homeless. We looked inside there and nothing.
The dumps, people walking through the dumps, looking in the boxes, whatever was down there, garbage bags, kicked them, everything. Everybody looked out,
Oh,
everybody.
I mean, even
You know, any strangers on the street, you know, you see somebody with their hair the same style or
follow
something,
them.
you'd have to look and wait till they turn around. And
I would follow him. We were at Star Wars one time, and this girl got out of the car, and I swear to God, it looked so much like Erika. And he looked at me and goes, "Graham, is that my mom?" I said, "I don't know, but we're gonna find out." And she passed it. I was crazy, but I drove in front of her.
Carol remembers lots of times when one of Erika's two sons saw women who looked like Erika, whether at the grocery or elsewhere. Erika's youngest son is named Destin Schwendeman, who was 4 when she went missing. Her oldest, Brandon Norton, was 8.
And I mean, you know, what really got me is they would actually look on the way home from school. They would be looking out the bus window to see if they see her. And Brand especially would come home and say, "Haven't seen her today." And then they got a little disappointed because there was one detective, I forgot his name. He told Brandon, he goes, "You don't worry." He goes, "We're going to get the person who did this." And he feels they lied.
Police became frustrated with the public. Someone had to know what happened to Erika. They just weren't saying it. And it might be an understatement to say Erika's family was frustrated too. Were detectives even working on the case anymore? They couldn't be sure. Here's Lisa, Erika's sister, still speaking alongside her mother.
not knowing is the worst. And I'm sorry, but Norwich police.
I think I did more looking than they did.
From when she first filled out the report, well, you know she's this, you know she's that, you know she's drug issues, you know. No. She's still a person. She's still missing.
You know, I'd appreciate it, even if they call once a month and say, "Look, we haven't forgotten you."
If we could, I mean, we would want to call the family every day or once a week.
That's Chris, the lieutenant.
We would never, ever, say that they would be bothering us or calling us too much if they called us once a week or once a month either. And, obviously we can always do better. We can always improve our communication. So that's definitely something that we could absolutely do. A lot of the times I think when people get misconceptions about these types of cases and think that police may not be doing everything they can do is because of that reason. Unfortunately, it's not the case. The work still is happening, but yeah, obviously that's something that we could improve upon. But there's never a time where we would ever discourage them from contacting us with any questions. Once a month, once a week, anytime.
So it's hard to give you an every 2 week or every 3 week, because that's not the case. It's pretty much wait for some new information because we've run everything down that we possibly can right now. And I know that's probably frustrating for the family to hear every time that I've met with the mothers and sisters here. Unfortunately, I have to tell them, nothing new.
Kyle, the detective.
With the workload, I'm trying to figure out an estimate of how much time per week I actually spend doing this job and thinking about this job. At some point in time, I have to make time for my family and my personal life as well. And just if I come in at, say, 7:45 in the morning and there's 2 new cases from the night before that need to be talked about, the days just fly by. We'll start talking about a case and all of a sudden it's noon, and then if I had a thought in my head where I was going to call somebody today, 10 minutes into my day, that thought could be gone because there's so much new information coming in about other stuff. So I would say that I probably should have reached out to the family more regularly. It's just a matter of time, and it's not something we have a ton of.
Erika's family went down to Howard T. Brown Memorial Park alongside Norwich Harbor on March 6, 2009. They celebrated Erika's 29th birthday even though she wasn't there, released some balloons in her memory, and hoped she was still somewhere alive.
Because she loved it down there. She used to go sit on the bench. And she said it was peaceful, and she just sat there and watched everybody.
When the children found Erika's remains in Montville, she'd been missing for more than 5 years. Back then, though, a state police spokesman told the Day that the remains had been there for just 1 year. We can't say for sure where her remains were before that. Because of how long it had been, former Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Wayne Carver couldn't determine the cause of Erika's death. In an email, the current Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. James Gill, said that's not surprising. He said in cases like Erika's, the main role of the medical examiner actually is to identify the remains. Remember how Erika was on crutches when she graduated from Norwich Free Academy in 1998 because she'd been in a bad car wreck? Screws left in her ankle actually helped the medical examiners identify her.
Yeah, because they asked me if she had an injury. And I said, yeah, because the doctor had to leave a couple screws in her ankle because I guess the bone grew over it or something. So they said it would better just leave it like it is. And that's when I said, yeah, she did. And they said, oh, okay. Then we had to give our DNA. I did, her youngest son, and my daughter, Lisa. We went and we gave our DNA, and a couple of nights later they came to the house and said it was her.
It seemed obvious to investigators that Erika hadn't stumbled into the woods on her own. They deemed her death a murder and converged on Oxaboxo Dam Road, going door to door to see if anyone had seen anything suspicious. They kept the road closed for several days, but apparently didn't turn up any clues. Destin, the youngest of Erika's sons, wouldn't go anywhere near the place for most of his life. Recall, he was 4 when Erika went missing. He's going on 17 today.
The youngest one, we'd usually go down every year to where they found her remains, and we put new decorations on it. He wouldn't go down. He says, no, I don't want to find out.
Erika's mom.
Because he feels cheated because he didn't get to do it with her. His brother did. I mean, his brother was going on 10. And he was just a little kid. Matter of fact, he just went to where his mother was buried this year with me. He wouldn't go other than that.
In the fall of 2012, October more specifically, the state announced an up to $50,000 reward for anyone who provided information leading to an arrest and conviction in Erika's case. It's the maximum amount allowed under state law.
It's extremely frustrating. It's definitely not without, or not due to a lack of trying.
That's Lieutenant Chris Conley again.
Very talented investigators assigned to this cold case unit prior. Kyle was one of them and was successful with other cold cases, and that's why, because of Kyle, Detective Bessie's success rate with other cold cases, he was assigned this case.
Also a frustrating factor, and something that kind of messes up one direction that we're going and leads us down another, is when people come with misinformation just because they want to be involved.
And that's Kyle, the detective. He joined Norwich Police in October 2007, but didn't become lead on the Cirioni case until September 2014.
We have to take every piece that is given to us and try to decipher if it's credible, one, and then two, if it's valuable to the case. Then we'll devote say 2-3 hours to run it down, and then if it turns into something, that could turn into 5 more hours. So there's a lot of, I don't want to say wasted time, but a lot of time that is spent going on information that somebody just gave to us because they wanted to be involved. It happens with every single one of these cold cases. Can't really explain why people do it, but it happens all the time. So that's also our hurdle.
Over the years, suspects and persons of interest came and went. But none of them has panned out. Not yet, at least.
A lot of these cases, too, you can work them as hard as you possibly can and devote as many man-hours as you possibly can. But until that information or that person comes forward with that information, because there's circumstances in people's lives that dictate when these cases are solved. We may have an idea, we may have directions, we may have an idea who did it. It's different, and I'm not saying we do in this case, but what I'm saying is we may have a gut instinct of a direction to go in. That's a lot different than what we can prove and what we can put on paper, and that a judge will sign for an arrest warrant, and that a prosecutor will be able to successfully prove in court beyond a reasonable doubt. All those things have to come into play, and that depends on a lot of people that may be involved in these incidents or have information that their life circumstances are not allowing them to give the information, and then something happens, and someone comes forward with information, or they say, you know what, now I'm ready to talk, or now I'm ready to help out with these things.
Both officers said the case is cold right now, but it was hot as recently as 2 years ago. I know because I was there. I had no idea then that I'd be doing this podcast, but on March 23rd, 2016, I checked out to 450 East Main Street in Norwich. Officers in white suits and blue gloves had converged on apartment 1 of the building, which also houses East Side Discount Liquor. Blue slippers covered their shoes, and a couple of them took photos from just about every possible angle, inside and outside. It's a boxy, 2-story building with grayish-brownish plastic siding. At the time, it looked like it had been renovated pretty recently. The apartment in question was on the right side of the building, on the first floor. I watched as investigators walked in and out, carrying paper bags and boxes, presumably filled with possible evidence. At one point, they also lifted doors to a cellar out back and went downstairs. I wasn't sure what they could really get 10 years after Erika's disappearance, and I'm still not. But I've since learned police went to that apartment because they have reason to believe Erika was there on New Year's Eve, 2006.
Fortunately, we came up short there. I think that was largely in part of the time that had passed. We were there, I believe that was June of 2000. Well, do you remember when you were out there? March? Okay. And that was 16 or 15? Okay. Yeah, so there's a prime example of how time just passes. We're almost coming up 2 years on that. So from 2007 all the way to 2016, that much time passed before that piece of information was brought to us, and in that time, evidence deteriorates, and so we came up short there.
There are rumors about what might have happened at the apartment that night, but none has been corroborated.
So she said she found me on Facebook, and she inboxed me and asked me to please call her. It was very important, and I did, and I was kind of surprised, 'cause I wasn't going to do it at first, but I called her, and she seemed to know what she was talking about. I mean, I got my daughter, who's very negative about a lot of things, got her to listen, and she said, yeah, I think she knows.
And some of the details she gave, they weren't police in any of the newspaper reports, or it wasn't public knowledge. So she knew things that weren't out in the public already.
The woman apparently talked to police too, but they never made an arrest. As a reporter, I don't deal in speculation. I would only name names if someone had been publicly accused. Because that's not the case here, I'm not going to elaborate on the rumors.
Yet I think there's a misconception in the public that, we can show up at a crime scene and take a fingerprint and feed it into a computer here, and then a person's face pops up. That's just not the case,
That's Lieutenant Conley.
And I think the bottom line is people solve crime. The community solves crime. We're largely dependent on the information that's provided to us. And in this case, with this officer's efforts, this detective's efforts, the other detective who had the cold case prior to him, there's definitely no lack of effort in trying. It's just, it's the will of the people that have the information to give it to us. I have no doubt this case will be solved. I have no doubt that, the person who did this will be brought to justice. The question is, when are the people who are holding that, or the person or the people who are holding that information and not coming forward with it, when they're going to be ready to give this family some peace?
Next week on Case Unsolved.
Now she called, and I just had assumed it was about that, but then her voice was just saying, I need your help, and I blew her off. It's a phone call that lives in my head forever.
If that rumor is true that she owed somebody money for drugs, and she was in something deep that she couldn't get out of.
Because I had a couple come to my house and threaten Erika.
My mom missed out on 12 of my birthdays. She missed out on most of my brother's life. She missed out on seeing her own granddaughter. It's made me more protective about my daughter and worried about what's going to happen to my daughter when she gets older, because I wouldn't want something like that happening to her.
If you have any tips about Erika Cirioni's murder, please contact the Norwich Police Department at 860-886-5561, extension 7. The anonymous tip line is at extension 4. Or you can call the New London State's Attorney's Office at 860-443-2835. If you have any questions about the Cirioni case, post it on our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Case Unsolved, or email us at caseunsolved@theday.com. Case Unsolved is produced by Peter Wappy and me, Carlos Virgen. Reporting was done by Lindsay Boyle. Editing and audio mixing by Peter Wappy. Tim Cotter is executive producer, and Sassy Larrañeta is associate producer. I produced the music used in the series. This has been a production of The Day in New London, Connecticut.